Hi, my name is Jill, and I make videos using poker in virtual reality. It's Texas Hold'em poker with worldwide opponents and a bankroll that can't be cashed out. For more information, look at the description of this video. Let's get started. In this video, I'm going to share some tips about how you can recognize the 4 common table types you'll find in poker in virtual reality, and then share how I've used these tables to practice my poker skills for in and out of VR. As with live poker and online poker, poker in virtual reality has various dynamics that you can see repeated over and over. And once you recognize them, you can tune your game to improve your odds of winning various hands, even if they're speculative or a complete bluff. If you've got questions or comments, I'd love to read them. Now, before we dive into the various table types and how you can use them to practice your game, let's talk a little bit about what I mean when I say the table types and why they matter in the first place. When I talk to poker players about what they want the most from their poker game, the answers aren't surprising. They want to win more pots and bigger pots. They want to keep more of their bankroll by making good folds and getting out of the way at the right time so they lose less. And if they're new to the game and still learning solid poker fundamentals like counting their outs, calculating pot odds, and figuring out how much equity their hands have, they're looking for useful practice environments that give them time to think. Useful practice environments are key when you're learning poker and when you're building a bankroll. Later in this video, as I go through the table types, I'll share how you can quickly recognize what kinds of things are easiest to practice on the table that you're on, and then you can use this to decide whether you're at the right table. You'll have to learn how to deal with the less than ideal tables too, don't get me wrong, but hopefully this video makes judging all of your tables just a little bit easier. Now, I'll be upfront here. I'm a relatively new poker player myself, and I envision that these videos are being used by other poker players who are relatively new and working on improving their game. There's a lot that we're all working on right now, so initially, as new poker players, we're probably wanting to take part in soft games to practice the basics and take time to think and not have to spend too much cash. Okay, so what are soft games when it comes to no limit Texas Hold'em poker? Simply put, since the rules of no limit Texas Hold'em poker say that you can bet any amount at any time, including your entire chip stack, soft tables are poker tables where you can put in a lot of hands without facing a lot of pressure from your opponents. The cost of entry is low, and that means that you can put in a lot of hands and you can see a lot of flops. As a result, you don't find yourself in the uncomfortable position where you're tempted to risk your entire bankroll or a large part of your bankroll with speculative hands, and you can focus more on the poker skills that you're trying to build. And of course, watching poker vlogs and poker strategy videos like this, studying pre-flop charts, GTO, exploitation strategies, and even getting advice from a more experienced poker player or trusted mentor, all of this is excellent and necessary if you want to level up your game. But ultimately, you need to put in thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of hands on the poker table to truly train your poker intuition. Learning always requires the hands-on grind, and you can imagine and study all you want, but the hands-on grind can't be skipped, and it is part of the journey. This is where poker in virtual reality is awesome. You can turn on the headset at any time of the day or night, and because the money is fake in these poker games, there are, by definition, more recreational players. People who play poker from the comfort of their own home in this immersive, live feel environment, looking to have a few laughs and wind down from the day. In addition, you and everyone else there is risking a virtual bankroll, but you can still use this poker time to practice real poker skills and real ways to deal with feeling tilted. And let's not forget, someone like you who's looking to improve your poker game will have a significant skill edge most of the time, and you can use this edge to run through more practice scenarios during your sessions. Do beware, however, your skill edge will only go so far. Despite the fact that it's a form of fake money poker and there's a lot of recreational players, there's a core group of highly skilled poker players who have a very good grip in this VR poker environment. Their experience can throw your game off, so I'll be sure to talk a little bit about how to recognize the more skilled players and how to combat things that they'll use to disrupt this effectiveness of your practice sessions. But before I get going with the meat and potatoes of today's topic, I'm just getting started creating poker strategy videos like this, and I would sincerely appreciate your support. If you're enjoying this topic, I'd really love it if you take a moment to hit like on the video here on YouTube and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you have friends who are into poker and interested in learning and improving like you are, please share this video with them too. It takes many hours of planning and execution to put these videos together, so getting that positive feedback is really appreciated. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Now, let's get back to talking about poker. Let's get started with the table types. To categorize the table types, I created what I called a spectrum of aggression. Essentially, it's a bar that ranges from most passive to most aggressive, and then I noted 4 common spots on the spectrum and what each of these tables are like. Now, with 6 to 8 people on the table and a constant churn of people coming and going between rounds, table types can shift pretty quickly, and you'll have to watch for that as well. Let's start with the 2 most common table types in poker and virtual reality. The most passive type I have dubbed limpy and checky. Here, it's common to find that everybody limps into pretty much every pot. Nobody raises the pre-flop bet, and many post-flop streets check around or use minimum bet sizes. Pot sizes are small. These can be excellent practice grounds, but in practicing, you may find that the table type changes around you and that you actually shift it. On the other side of the spectrum of aggression is the one that pisses everybody off the most, whether you're a real poker player or someone who plays in VR for fun. This is the most aggressive table type, and I refer to it as the all-in maniacs table. Here, the majority of rounds force you to make an all-in decision pre-flop. Multiple players on the table often have extremely poor understanding of how poker works or how to make a good hand, and they go all in with 2 wet napkins every round, round after round, until they're broke and forced to leave the table. It's not so lovingly called bingo poker and is a regular occurrence on the micro and low stakes in VR. It can be very profitable there as the pot sizes often get large, but there's high variance, so you could also lose buy-in after buy-in in pretty short order. It's a great place to practice patience and tilt management. In between these 2 extremes are 2 table types that I prefer to play in myself as I work on improving my own poker game and skills. The first middling table type is more to the passive end of the spectrum, and it's the one that I call a lazy river with 1 speedboat. The table is mostly passive, like the limpy and checky table, but there's 1 player on the table, maybe it's you, maybe it's me, who joins and plays more in a aggressive style, like loose and aggressive, tight and aggressive, where they fold out complete trash pre-flop and raise pre-flop when deciding to enter a hand. As the only real table aggressor, there may be a lot of passive plays between hands where the aggressive player folds out early, and the hands they do play in will result in more uncontested pot wins, where everybody just folds, dotted with villain's hero call attempts on the river now and then to see if the aggressive player is bluffing. The pot sizes on this table are variable. It's small when the aggressive player isn't betting up the pot, just like the limpy and checky table, and larger when the aggressive player gets a taker for their betting sprees, with a bit of randomization thrown in when the aggressive player has another player on tilt, and that player now becomes aggressive on their own. Finally, there's the middling table type that is more to the aggressive side of the spectrum. I've called this one the raise and rumble room, because it can get pretty wild. It's not as crazy and as wild as the all-in maniacs room, where most of the action is pre-flop or just after the flop. In the raise and rumble room, you'll often get to see a flop, you'll get to see the turn and get to see the river come out with betting rounds in between, But in these rooms, there's multiple aggressive players playing loose and aggressive or tight and aggressive play styles. So the pre-flop raises are common, and on the other streets, you'll have to be prepared for double barreling, triple barreling, three bets, all these kind of things constantly. Stacks often go in by the turn or the river, and there are big pots, rivalries, and emotional chaos. And now remember, none of these tables are going to last very long. Limpy and Checky can change into a festival of all-in maniacs with the addition of just one crazy player, and then settle right back to Limpy and Checky when that player leaves. But sometimes the all-in maniac behavior is contagious and continues past the original aggressor, settling into something closer to the raise and rumble room. And the table type that starts out as a lazy river with one speedboat quickly shifts into the raise and rumble room when another aggressive player joins the mix. At these transition points, you'll find a bit of chaos and upset as the table turns over. In VR, people definitely are more free to speak their mind than they might be allowed to do in a live poker environment, and they'll be using whatever colorful language they think is justified in the heat of the moment. And you want to be fast with your player muting tool in VR as a result. Ultimately, the tables with aggressive betting tend to shed the truly passive players and retain only the passive players that have shark tendencies. The truly passive players opt to leave the table and find another table that's hopefully limpy and checky just the way they like it, while those with shark tendencies will lay in wait. And as with live poker, beware the player who folds a lot pre-flop and quietly watches the table, and seriously consider getting out of the way if they decide to take on the table maniac, because it's about to be a feeding frenzy. Okay, great. So we have gone through the table types, and I'm sure from your own poker playing experience, you were able to conjure up images in your head for each of these tables along this spectrum of aggression. Now let's get into talking about how to capitalize on each of these table types to not only grow your virtual bankroll, but get a chance to practice key poker skills that you can use into the future, no matter where you're playing poker. Let's start out with the most passive table on our spectrum of aggression. This is the limpy and checky table. This table is a fantastic place to practice the simple skills of counting your outs and calculating pot odds. With an extremely passive table, you're rarely put under pressure to call pre-flop raises, and players are happy to check it out after the flop so they can see more cards. Without facing the pre-flop raises, your cost to get to the flop and make these post-flop calculations is low, and it can be an excellent investment in your poker skill set. Another thing you can use at the limpy and checky table is to practice your raise first in charts based on your position on the table. Also, it's a very nice soft place to practice double and triple barreling after the flop because it's unlikely that you're going to get re-raised or jammed on. With you being the only real table aggressor, this type of practice will actually shift the table dynamics toward the second table, as I mentioned before, that of the lazy river with one speedboat. But before we dive into the lazy river with one speedboat type of table, let's look at the most aggressive table type because it's the one I find people have the most troubles with. It's the one that puts them on tilt more than any other, the all-in table for maniacs. On this table type, you'll find a wide range of poker skills, from people who don't even know that a flush beats a straight, through people who can see their outs in an instant and can calculate pot odds in their head. What they have in common is that they're all faced with the same choice almost every hand. All in pre-flop or fold. Sometimes there's a brief moment where players get to see the flop before facing that ultimate choice of all in or fold, but the majority of the time it's an all-in maniacs festival of chaos and bad cards, all done pre-flop. This type of table is fantastic for tightening up your game and improving your emotional control. Similar to how tournament play with a limited chip stack will help encourage you to practice a tighter game, for players who are serious about improving their poker skills, being faced with the prospect of losing buy-in after buy-in against maniacs who may not even know how to play the game will almost force you to practice things like tightening your pre-flop starting hand ranges, irrelevant of your position on the table. Since you're going all in pre-flop, it doesn't matter what spots you're on all that much. Folding to continued aggression with extreme prejudice if you get to see a cheap flop but don't connect to the board. And of course, here's where you get to practice all types of emotional self-regulation and tilt control. From forgetting what you folded as soon as they're gone, through to graciously accepting the wins of other players who risk their bankroll over and over with incredibly trashy hands while you fold and fold and fold and can't catch a hand. So I hear some of you now, as you think about that uh, all-in maniacs table type and lament about the last time you were on one of them. Some of you watching right now are thinking, what about that lazy river with the one speedboat table type? That one sounded nice. And I agree. That is currently my favorite table type. But as I said, that one tends to start out as a limpy and checky table, and it's the person like you or me that joins it and shifts it to the next table type of lazy river with one speedboat. In this table type, since it's you or me who are practicing the skills and assessing these table types, that means that we are the one speedboat. And in this scenario, we get a soft table to practice things like our raise first in charts versus limpers, according to our position on the table. Isolating weaker players using pre-flop raises and double and triple barreling for heads up at showdown. And in general, looking for the places to practice applying pressure to your opponents based on board texture and scare cards. Of course, as with any table type, there's always going to be a chance to practice some emotional self-regulation and tilt control, because some of these passive players won't like that you're betting, and if you muck your cards on uncontested pots, still other players will berate you for not showing your hand. Again, the player mute and freeze functions are excellent if you're working on improving your technical poker skills, but if you're looking for practice managing your tilt, you can go with your own bad self. The final table type I want to discuss in this video is the raise and rumble room. This one gets accused of being an all-in maniacs table, but that wouldn't be fair. In the raise and rumble room, you're more likely to get thinking players who know very well how to play poker, but because you've got 2 or 3 aggressive players on the table, the betting can get wild in the post-flop streets, and quite often there's a lot of all in by the river going on. In this table, you'll be faced with max pressure to decide from street to street. As a result, it's a great place to practice things like tight pre-flop starting ranges based on your position on the table, checking in flow as opposed to leading the bet and floating instead of and flat calling to the river, and then raising and being re-raised upon. No matter what table type you prefer, each of these tables I've talked about in this video offer different opportunities to practice and hone your poker skills and intuition. I hope you found value in this video and have some new thoughts to bring with you to the tables. Whether you're playing live games, online poker for real cash, or poker in virtual reality cash tables like I am with fake money, there's a lot of room to learn and grow and a lot of new friends to make along the way. I'd love to hear your comments and questions in the comments below. Have a great day, my poker friends.